What is up, Thralls of Metal? I'm Jammin Jon.
Miller.
Necrotic Nick.
Shredlord.
And we are bringing you the long-awaited ranking of the band Incantation. Woo!
What are we incanting?
Demons and shit.
Now, I personally have been a somewhat long-time fan of Incantation, not as long as this fucker. I think I first heard of Incantation when we went and saw him with Dying Fetus, to be honest. I had never heard of Incantation before, so...
That was the first time I'd ever seen them, but I've been listening to them probably since about 2000. So, yeah, about 20 plus years of just disgusting, ugly death metal. It's really shaped me into the horrible person that I am.
They've always flown under the radar to me. Definitely knew who they were, never really listened to them much until this discography ranking.
Yeah, that kind of goes with me. I heard of them. An old buddy of mine had an album of theirs, and that was early 2000s. So, but never really gave them a serious listen until their newer stuff. And Jammin Jon led me back into their path, so to speak.
It's dark and sticky and evil.
Yep.
I can't remember which one I listened to first because a lot of their early album covers are very similar looking.
Yes.
So
same color, almost.
They look like they just pulled an image from like a Silent Hill fucking still and like, yeah, that gross thing.
Yep.
And
the
they do have
song
some
titles.
awesome album art.
Some of the best
and song titles.
blasphemous song titles ever. We're gonna go
song titles ever sometimes.
They're poetry.
Yep.
They don't do religion.
Foreshadowing?
Nope. So to all our religious viewers, keep watching though. This is still really good.
Yeah, it's great. So, Incantation was formed in New Jersey in 1989 by Mr. John McEntee and Paul Ledney, two guys that were in the band Revenant. And then in the mid to late 90s, John McEntee moved the band to Cleveland.
Yeah, and if you're going to do doomy, gloomy death stuff, Cleveland's where you want to go.
That's a good place to go.
Yeah.
So, they jammed for a while on Incantation, and then in 1991 began writing their debut album, Onward to Golgotha, which was then released in 1992 on Relapse Records, featuring John McEntee on guitars, Craig Hilliard on guitars and vocals. I'm not going to get into it.
Well, I mean, you could just watch our Disma review.
Yeah, watch our Disma review. Mr. Ronnie Dio, not Ronnie James Dio.
Which is fucked up.
I know.
Joe was
Instantly
really
disappointed
disappointed.
Shred. Right? I was like, oh, look, Ronnie Dio. Really? Not him. Oh.
Of course, I didn't really think Dio was in there, but
Well, it'd be
kind of
cool if it
strange
was.
that a guy named Ronnie Dio. It'd have
It
been
does
way
make you
cool.
perk up.
And Mr. Jim Rowe on drums, who didn't stick around a whole hell of a long time, but made a definite valiant effort to write a pretty killer debut album, I think.
Yep.
To be honest, Onward to Golgotha, I think is the perfect representation of both who this band are and who they would become later on. So, I had this ranked at number 4, and normally I'd complain about a poor mix, but I've grown to like the mud. I think this album certainly had more death than doom on it.
Yes.
Songs like Christening the Afterbirth, the song Golgotha itself is pretty gnarly. Entrainment of Evil, Immortal Cessation. I mean, to be honest, I could name every song on
Don't do
every
that,
album.
because then everyone else would have no song.
Right, exactly. But,
Everyone else, what he said.
You only named one of mine so far, so.
but I had it at number 4.
I had this at number 2. This is another rare example of a band absolutely slaying on their first album. This is kick-ass, straightforward death metal, pretty solid all around. The production is a little but overall, pound for pound, one of the best metal debuts I think I've ever heard. Deliverance of Horrific Prophecies, Unholy Massacre. Love the opening riff with stuff like that. It is just cavernous evil, and it's filthy good. I enjoy this. 2 for me.
Yeah, cavernous is the operative word. I have this in number 4 as well. The vocals, I like how they did them because before one growl ends, another one starts, and it's drenched in reverb, so you get this giant, echoey, evil sound. But yeah, it's definitely more of a straight-up death metal album. I love how filthy and murky it is. Like, they just wanted it to sound disgusting and mission accomplished. Very similar to Immolation at the time, too. Like, they kind of were, battling it out in terms of that sound, like who was like the most hallmark of these like disgusting, ugly new death metal bands that were coming up at the time.
And we got to benefit in that because they're both badass.
Oh yeah. I mean, if you love Incantation, you probably should love Immolation too. But Unholy Massacre, right there with you. Profanation, Rotting Spiritual Embodiment.
Yeah.
This whole album is just disgusting. And honestly, it's one of their fastest albums, too. Again, the Death Doom elements are very minimal on here, but flat out awesome old school 90s death metal. It's disgusting.
Yeah, I had it 4, but I really love this album. It fell, I would have had it at probably 1 or 2, but it fell as I listened to the other albums that I hadn't and some of the ones that I had before. But Rotting Spiritual, that's heavy as hell, man. I don't know. That song's got it, Golgotha. That riff about a minute in, and then it goes to the verse, that badass, and it's just all good. That song is a really good, like you said, a kickoff to an album, a band, like the song, everything about that first song on that first album for them was just lights out. Right out of the
to
gate.
knock on the door and say we're here.
Yep.
They knocked out everything. The imagery was foul and weird looking. Their logo is just fucking disgusting.
Yeah, and that's the sound. It's frantic, dark, brooding. It's huge.
It's
sounding.
evil as fuck.
Yeah, you made a whole bunch of fans right away. Way to go.
All right, so 2 years go by, and luckily they decide to release another album, Mortal Throne of the Nazarene, released in 1994, also on Relapse Records. Ronnie Dio exits the band.
Damn, man.
I'm sorry, Joe.
You want to have to do a really good solo career. Wait, no.
Did he ride on the wings of a dragon?
I don't know.
It was probably a rotting,
Of course
festering
he did.
dragon.
Of course he did.
We could probably reach out at this point in the game and figure that out.
Well, to that Ronnie Dio.
Yep, to that Ronnie Dio. Yep.
Sorry.
Dan Camp joins the band on bass. There's not a whole lot of information about Dan Camp. I had this ranked at number 6, which is bizarre. I'm actually wearing the Mortal Throne of the Nazarene shirt right now because I really love that album. As I got further along in the discography and listened to some more albums, this fell a little bit for me. The production is, I think, worse than the first, but all the songs are whoop ass. So I mean, what do you do? The mix does eventually grow on me. It is a shorter album, only 8 songs, but as you get through, you find that most of these albums are 8 songs. The entire album, though, feels nasty and dirty and grimy and all the things all the adjectives you come to love. Greasy, describing Incantation.
Slimy.
They bring the doom in now. The song The Ibex Moon gets really doomy.
I love that song.
And really
That song
deathy
is
at the
awesome.
same time. Abolishment of Immaculate Serenity is a beast of a song, almost funeral doom.
Oh my god, that
at
song's
times.
heavy.
Heavy as fuck. And number 6 for me. Killer album.
And I got this at 3. I really like the doomy stuff, so this spoke to me. The Ibex Moon, you brought that up. Now, the production is missing a little oomph. But
It's weird.
like you said, I listened to it more and it grew on me. The production, it went up in my ranking as I listened to this. And the vocals were a little buried, but that worked in my favor of it because I don't typically like the style of vocal that real, you can't understand anything that's coming out, where the Cookie Monster thing came from. So that helped this album. And I'm a sucker for that 90s death thrash sound, and that's what it had. So I had it at number 3.
I had it at 6. This, as a follow-up to the first album, I felt like it was a good follow-up. However, I don't believe that it was anywhere near as strong as Onward to Golgotha. I do like the Doom introductions, but I think later on in the discography, it gets a little better as far as the Doom stuff goes. And yeah, the production is a little bit more murkier, but I think they did that intentionally. It's just more evil, more cavernous, more, heavy, more everything. But in reference, they actually do a re-recording remaster?
What's the original demo?
Okay.
And it's in a reverse order of tracks, which, front this first.
Either way, it's awesome.
Yeah.
That's Upon the Throne of the Apocalypse, and that might be ranked higher because of that better production. It is night and day better, which in my opinion just makes those songs so much stronger. But overall, the songs were still great, but man, Upon the Throne of the Apocalypse,
You can feel the evil just creeping out of your speakers. I also had this at number 6. I do have issues with the production too. I think it's the guitars feel a little bit gainier.
yes.
And like they kind of crackle a little bit, like almost kind of like black metal-ish.
It sizzles.
Yeah.
It's like so much gain that it's just there's a sizzle of high end.
And, you know, when you have all the low stuff in there, like the bass kind of blends in, the drums are, you know, very echoey as well, too. And I kind of like the vocals back in the mix because it just kind of added this layer of just otherworldly grime behind it. But I didn't like the earlier tracks as much as I like the later tracks. The earlier tracks I thought were, you know, good. But again, that production didn't really lend to it very much. But when you get down to like Essence Ablaze, Ibix Moon, and Abolishment of Immaculate Serenity is the best song on that album. Holy shit, that song is heavy. I really liked all the stuff towards the back. I think that is where the death doom elements really kind of started to come together a bit, because that was kind of a new venture for the band, because before that, it was mostly just straightforward death metal. They showed off some cool shit on here, and yeah, while this is a little bit lower on my list, it's still a damn good album.
So then 4 years go by. We lose Jim Rowe on drums and Dan Camp on bass.
Dan, no!
And introduce in for one record and one record alone.
Ronnie Dio's back?
No. Daniel Corchado from The Chasm. By the way, check out The Chasm.
And Cenotaph.
What Pass. Yep. We saw The Chasm at MDF in 2019, and it was one of the best bands, I think, on the whole lineup. And then we add longtime drummer Kyle Severin, who is an absolute beast of a drummer and perfect for Incantation.
Absolutely.
We released Diabolical Conquest, still on Relapse Records. I had this at number 2, and I volleyed back and forth really between number 2 and number 1. But this ended up hitting number 2. Gone is the Mud from the production. The guitars sound evil.
Yes.
On this record.
Immediately
just
evil.
Nasty doom. The opener track, Impending Diabolical Conquest, is a beast of a song. The drum mix could have been tweaked a little bit, but that's not really a big deal. Not enough to throw it off for me. Again, only 8 songs, but 10 minutes longer. So they threw in a little bit more songwriting here. Disciples of Blasphemous Reprisal. You guys...
I love the
greatest
song titles.
in the world.
Maybe ever.
On Heavenly Skies, they started to introduce instrumentals.
Great song.
Kyle Severin's performance, for being his first time on the drums here for Incantation, is a hell of a performance. And let's not forget the 17-minute album closer, Into Infinite Twilight Majesty Infernal Damnation, is probably nearly a 17-minute opus of a song.
Fucking amazing.
But yeah, number 2 for me.
Yeah, that's why the drumming, the last 2 things you mentioned, is why I have it at number 2. And that song, the last song, is killer. And everything about it, the drumming, it all makes it interesting to listen to, where it really doesn't seem like you're listening to a 17-minute song or whatever.
It flows really, really well.
Yeah. The other thing about this album I love is the first 3 songs, they come out and they hit you right off the bat, and you know what you're getting into, and then they slide into that doomy stuff again, and I really enjoyed this album. The drum work, like you said, is killer on it, and it's consistent all the way through.
In the words of James Lipton, if you haven't listened to Incantation's Diabolical Conquest, then you haven't heard the best doom shit that Incantation has to offer. It is my clear-cut number 1 album. It is
number 1 here too.
Awesome. The one song that I'm glad nobody talked about was Shadows of the Empire. I think that song is badass. And Desecration's another great tune. This is just a perfect blend of what they would... Basically, from everything I'm hearing in the discography, this album is like the perfect blend for me of it all. And it's just fucking kick-ass from start to finish, man. It is just a banger, 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 banger.
I had a hunch this would be my number 1. I have always loved this album. Daniel's vocals are very different. He has not as low of a register, and he throws in more high screams. The writing is so much more dynamic, and it wasn't as though they didn't have dynamics before, but I just feel like they feel bigger. All the songs just feel bigger. A little bit of that black metal evil to it, which is just another layer of evil sprinkled on a giant pile of evil already.
Like you were getting at, it keeps it interesting.
Oh, it does.
That's why it's just a killer album from start to finish.
The riff work, I think, is way more pronounced. You know, the apocalyptic riffing, I think, it can get lost in the mix. I think the mix is much better in here, and you can actually hear more of the individual notes and such.
It is a little compressed.
It is a little bit, but I think they kind of had to do that that with, because I mean,
okay. That's how you know what? That's probably the only way you can contain some mud.
Yep.
When you have all that mud, you got to have a little compression to kind of keep certain shit out of the way.
And the bass work is really pronounced on this too. But I mean, you know, of course I'm going to talk about Unto Infinite Twilight, Majesty of Infernal Damnation, because I think that's one of my favorite incantation songs. And it's an awesome fucking title again. But United in Repugnance, no one brought that one up. I love that song as well, and that pretty much describes their fan base, because we are united in repugnance. Ethereal Misery too. I mean, the whole album, the whole album, all 8 tracks.
Now you're just making shit up.
You just jam it, and then you summon a creature because you played it forwards. You don't have to play it backwards.
No.
All right, so then 2 more years go by, and we end up with Infernal Storm, released in 2000 on Relapse Records. We say goodbye to Daniel Corchado, who goes on to the Chasm. And then we get Mike Saez on guitars and vocals, and Robert Jensch on bass. And Dave Coolross played on drums. Dave's a hell of a drummer. He's done work with Suffocation and Malevolent Creation.
Yep.
He was definitely a good choice for this band, although his style is a little bit more both blast beaty and thrashy at the same time. I had this record ranked at number 1. They fixed the minor issues, I think, with the sound. The dust is back. They have a little bit more raw sound. It doesn't sound as compressed. Songs like Anoint the Chosen is a good mixture of death and doom as only they can do it. The snare drum, I think, is tighter than a chipmunk's asshole. That's a little minor gripe I had.
Can't even hear them fart.
It's a little wound up.
Sempiternal Pandemonium, Heaven Departed. It sure departed. The opener riff sounds like it was created for the final funeral for the last holy person entering the gates of hell.
Here lies what's his name. Fuck him.
The opener riff, though, I thought actually sounded like a Burnt by the Sun riff off their last album. The dun 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 dun. That riff, Nocturnal Kingdom of Demonic Enlightenment.
That's one of my favorite songs they've ever written.
Yeah, just a banger through and through. But I really dug this album, listened to it multiple times over, and that's my number 1.
This one fell more middle bottom to me. As a whole, I think that it is a good, solid album, but when I listen to it as a whole, nothing really stands out to me with the exception of Nocturnal Kingdom of Demonic Enlightenment. Once again, that's probably one of my favorite songs that I think I've heard them do, but that wasn't enough to really catapult it up any higher. It's still Incantation doing exactly what you expect them to do, but with the rawness back a little bit, and I think maybe, new guys on guitar and bass, it just didn't hit as heavy for me, and for that reason it kind of fell down to number 8 where it sits for me.
I had this at number 9. I like this album. I mean, I like pretty much all his albums, and don't know, but this one might have been the first one I got. Again, your album covers are similar but awesome. But I don't know, I think the mix is maybe a little too dried up, and I love Dave Coolross's drummer, but he doesn't quite fit, because, I don't know, like, it just feels a little dry, and like they tried to do it more technical in spots, and the guitars didn't feel as heavy in the Death Doom sections. Like, that was something that kind of lost from Diabolical Conquest. But, I mean, overall, I like the songwriting. This has some killer songs. We already brought up, Heaven Departed, which I think Heaven Departed sounds probably the most like the previous Incantation albums. So, naturally, I love that one. And, of course, Nocturnal Kingdom of Demonic Enlightenment, because that is a flat-out badass song, but Extinguishing Salvation is also good.
Yeah.
It's just, unfortunately, there were so many other albums I thought that were better than this one, and it's different. This one definitely stands out, not just because the drum work's different, but I don't know. It feels like it's trying to be a little bit more technical, and I guess that's good that they're trying to expand their sound, but not all of it worked for me. But again, it's still a good album.
Yeah, it ranked at number 9, and it kind of fell as the other ones went up. This one fell, and the production took a step back a little bit for me, but there's some really killer parts in this. Nocturnal Kingdom, of course, that song is awesome. I enjoyed Heaven Departed for the most part, but it feels like I've heard these songs before. And but the middle part in Anoint the Chosen, that bridge, that's awesome. But overall, I feel like it just took a step back from the other album that I just listened to, and it just fell. But it's a good album.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard following a big, huge album like Diabolical Conquest. That's a massive album. So, yeah, pressure is on. I don't know.
And I think maybe I just need something new in this album, but 9.
So, 2 more years go by, and we lose Robert Jensch on bass and Dave Coolross on drums, and they release Blasphemy, released in 2002 on Candlelight Records. And we get Joe Lombard on bass, and Kyle returns on drums. Kyle sticks around, I think, for the remainder here.
Yep.
So, and actually, he's now their current drummer, too.
Yep,
So,
yeah, he's still in there.
We get Kyle for quite some time. Welcome home. I had Blasphemy at number 10. First of all, it's missing the heft in the recording. It sounds dry and flatlined, pretty much. Oddly enough, the song The Flatline is a beast of a song, though. And the drums on this album sound like they're being played at the end of a hallway. But like the hallway that the band's playing in. So you get everybody else at the top of the hallway, and the drums are way the fuck back.
I like the fact that the doomier, sludgier production kind of returned, but they mixed it all kind of...
a little goofy.
Yeah.
I don't know.
The record's got a little bit of a Morbid Angel vibe to it, I would say. That comes alive in several recordings in Incantation's history here. The song Rotting With Your Christ whoops ass the whole way through. Now, by the way, to me, some of, I think, the best song titles ever are on this record. His Weak Hand is nasty during that breakdown, and the drum work is really solid. They bring back the instrumental with the Sacrilegious of Righteousness and Agonizing Dementia.
Wow.
Yep.
That's a mouthful.
Yep, it's a mouthful, but it's a good song. Deceiver, Self-Righteous Betrayer has a nasty beat down, but I do want to say the 26-minute outro.
Oh, God.
Why?
There's nothing there.
Why?
Until really...
Why?
And on...
It's 30 minutes of the same sound looped. Like they heard one spooky noise, like record that. All right, now loop it. How
had to
long?
Be a troll. It was a troll.
It had to be
a troll.
Something. But yeah, overall, I think my biggest gripe about this album was production, because the songs aren't that bad.
Well, the album cover's pretty...
And the album cover's kind of stupid, too.
I don't, because they had great album covers up to this point. I was like,
then you saw this one, you're like, what?
I mean, it has like the poor CGI characters, kind of like, Dance of Death.
That was the thing. From
Yeah, I know.
It's 2002. Shit happened.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I also had it at 10. Like you were saying, it's got cool riffs and stuff, but it's just missing a lot. It just seems like it may have suffered because of outside stuff and all the changes that were happening. Maybe the drums kind of felt the same. There wasn't... It was like the whole thing wasn't inspired, really. It seemed like... And they just didn't develop some of these songs like I thought they should have, and really fine-tuned them, I guess. But it was just put out, and you get a kind of a lackluster album. But there's cool pockets of fucking sweet shit, and then it's just...
That was pretty much my thing. Like, I like all these albums, and there are songs I would come back and listen to on this. Uprising Heresy. Big, doomy bastard of a song with great harmonies. But this is my last place album, and it just, again, feels kind of uninspired. Like, felt like they put out an album to put out an album.
Just because they have to do it every 2 years.
Yeah. I like the fact that they went back to the kind of sludgier production because that really works well with Incantation, but the mix was off. And while this has some solid songs on it, again, like His Weak Hand's really good. Crown of Decayed Salvation, again, song titles rule.
Yeah.
It just kind of is a flat album, and they did a lot better after this.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, this is my dead last, too. In comparison to all the rest of their albums, this is easily the weakest one. The most lacking in just balls.
Yeah.
And just overall sounds uninspired to me. It wasn't an enjoyable listen.
It's the most, kind of bland album I've ever heard with a giant severed goat head on the cover. And I own a lot of albums with giant severed goat heads on the cover. So, yeah.
So then 2 more years go by. We lose Mike Saez, and the band kind of starts to morph into what it is today. John McEntee takes over on vocals, as he should.
He literally had the best voice for this the entire time.
Yep. Who knew? I think he knew. I think he knew, and he was just waiting.
He's being shy.
Like,
John,
oh,
why are you shy?
I don't want to go next to him. Like, holy shit.
We do a slight switch up on record labels. They go to listenable records for the U.S. and then mutilation for the overseas release. So yeah, the band is a three-piece at this juncture, and we all love our three-piece bands.
Yes, we do.
And one was Shred, as a matter of fact. I had this at number 3. I thought this was a pretty whoop-ass record. Especially after Blasphemy, this was just kind of like a breath of fresh air again. And again, having John McEntee on vocals really kind of, I think, made the album sound just a little bit more nasty. This, I thought, has more of a kind of a death thrash feel. Like, this record is cooking. I hate the sound of the poppy snare drum, though. I really...
Yeah.
Maybe it's just me, you know?
No, I get it, too.
I know what I like to hear out of drums, and while the mix was pretty solid, I hate that poppy snare drum. Anyway, sticks to the raw, gritty feeling, too, of Incantation, which I really like. I don't like it. I don't like the overly compressed stuff.
I like the grittier nature and the energy that came back on this album. That was a big thing.
Mm-hmm. The Oath of Armageddon has a pretty gross melody that runs all the way through it. Some black metal feels in Blaspheme the Sacraments. I think this might have some of Kyle Severin's best drum work in it. But yeah, this record is pretty whoop-ass.
Incantation is back on the scene like a sex machine, and it's good to hear them sounding like they give a shit again. A huge improvement, and from the opening riff of the title track, I was immediately drawn back in and enjoyed this record. This was number 5 for me. This is getting back to that fucking just heavy, powerful, balls out creativity that they're known for, and I dug it. So, 5.
This one fell a little bit, even though I do love this album. This is number 8 for me. John McEntee was like a secret weapon there in terms of vocals. His ability to do those super lows and kind of build up to the highs. It's super dramatic. I like the fact that this kind of has a bit of a thrashy feel. Dying Divinity might be one of my favorite Incantation tracks, like in general, in terms of like up-tempo ones, because that one just explodes. Like, there's no pretense or anything like that. There's no atmosphere building. It's like, no, we're just hitting you with riffs. And speaking of riffs, I think, again, they're back to being more distinct and more hooky on this one, too. And just, again, coming from Blasphemy, this is a decidedly more intense listen. This is like getting the blood boiling. And, yeah, it's a solid album. Again, it's just, there's other stuff I liked more, but hell of a debut for John McEntee's disgusting satanic throat. Because, Jesus Christ, that thing's a fucking weapon.
I had it at number 8. It slipped in line of other stuff that's just, I thought, better. But Thorns of Everlasting Persecution, I love the riffs in there. You know, going back to what we've all said, the riffs and everything about this album is killer. But it's just a simple matter of it just fell in line of some of the other albums. So
that happens.
Yeah, there's just fewer tracks that stood out to me, I guess.
It was just good hearing the intense apocalyptic riffing again. Like, I needed to hear some energy after Blasphemy.
So then another 2 years go by. We get Primordial Domination, 2006. It's actually on Ibex Moon Records, which is John McEntee's label. Sticks with the three-piece lineup that we had from the previous record. Still has raw, gritty sound to it. Still pretty hefty. Someone definitely loves their Morbid Angel. I mean, I could name off all the songs, but I'll just say, to me, this record didn't stick out as much. I had this at number 11. To me, there was nothing really on this album that caught my eye. Extirpated Dominus has some sweet tom work in it. Doctrines of Crucifixion whoops your mama's ass.
With a belt.
But I thought some of the songs actually sounded the same, too. Like, they really rely heavily on that tremolo, and it just kind of blends together, and for me, that's why it was at number 11.
I'm going to be a little different here. This one's my number 5. And honestly, this one kind of flies on their radar. Like, it's just kind of like a there release for most people, but honestly, coming back to this one, it's a little bit different just in terms of, all right, the production is a little bit cleaner, or at least cleaner for Incantation. So a lot of the stuff, that kind of gets buried in the mix, other ones is more audible. And I kind of like the fact that this one's a little bit more straightforward, kind of groove-laden death metal. They didn't do too much in the realm of like the apocalyptic, insane riffing. Like, this was just, heavy tremolos, big chunky riffs. I mean, the opening instrumental is kind of obituary-ish. I like that.
See that?
You know, you get some cool flourishes. The bass outro on The Stench of Crucifixion, really cool. I like it because it's a little bit different, and at this point, you know, they've done an Incantation album that kind of brought back that Incantation sound with Decimate Christendom. Yeah. This one was just like, hey, let's kind of just have some fun and riff it out and kind of groove along, and that kind of makes it stand out a bit. But Extirpated Dominus, you brought that one up. The Fallen Priest and Hail Babylon. All solid tracks. I think this is probably, I would say, the most underrated one in their discography, but that's just me. Because we're going to get some different opinions here.
Yeah, I have this at number 9. While I will admit the production is pretty stellar here, I did enjoy that. I missed some of those doomy things and some of the other things, and for that reason, it just kind of goes more towards the bottom. When you combine those other parts that I'm missing with the straight ahead, like death metal thrashy stuff, to me it makes those each other pop more. And missing those elements is really why this album fell to number 9 for me.
I also had it at 11, and it could have been, I don't know, it's just more of the same, I guess, and nothing really stood out. When I went back and listened to everything, I listened to it all through, and when I go back like the third time, I kind of pick and choose songs that stood out or that I had little stars on, you know, so to speak. And I found myself not going back to anything on this album as much, so that's why it fell. It's very consistent, but nothing stands out. And while I do, like you guys said, the production, I do like that. It is missing a little bit of that grit, that grime, but it's just good songs. But it's just like the bar is, they've put the bar here.
Yeah.
This is a consistently album, but it's just not anything that stands out.
So then, 6 long years go by. They take a little break. We lose Joe Lombard on bass, and rest in peace, good sir. He unfortunately committed suicide in 2012, which is a fucking bummer.
Yeah.
So, heart goes out to the family and whatnot. We get Vanquish in Vengeance. We pick up Alex Books on guitar and Chuck Sherwood on bass. And they go back to listenable records. I had this ranked at number 9. First of all, I think this record sounds a little bit more modern and definitely compressed. But there's a reason, as it is mixed by Mr. Dan Swano. Again, I thought it sounded a little bit too modern for at least for Incantation, but the hell do I know? While I think they did fine as a 3-piece, I think adding in another guitar player was a good call. For a majority of the record, all the riffs are harmonized. Like all those nasty chugger riffs, like in Progeny of Tyranny. Damn, what a good addition. But it just fell a little bit for me because there were other albums I liked more. Again, with a band like Incantation who just consistently releases whoop-ass records, what do you do?
Keep releasing them.
Yep. This one fell a little bit for me, but it doesn't mean it wasn't a killer album.
And I had this at 7, and again, one of those that was switching around at the end. I dig this album, but it's middle of the line for Incantation because they're a killer band. Bottom line, you get into these guys. Legion of Dis, that's a perfect death doom song. I mean, if you had to look that up in Wikipedia or old school dictionary, actual book, that would be the song for the perfect death doom definition of it.
It's flat out demonic.
Yes, that middle riff in Invoked Infinity, it leads in with that really nasty groove and then that sour note. I love those sour notes.
Oh, they got plenty.
Yeah, they have a ton of them, and it's just good sound. I dug it, and all the songs flowed well. It had a really good album feel to it, but it just fell to number 7.
That happens. I had this at number 3. And, well, so did Treadlord, because, you know, we both heard this and was like, holy shit, that's pretty fucking awesome. I like the Dan Swano mix.
Yes.
Now, I think he does better in terms of other mixes he does the band because he appears on, I believe, every other album in terms of their producer. But something about this album, it just feels like a demon awoke, and he brought riffs with him. Books was the perfect fit at the time in terms of bringing in other guitarists that could contribute in terms of just big, ugly riffs. He played in Gorephobia for a long time, and, I mean, he knows his death metal. And, God, these songs are just flat out nasty. This album dooms even harder than before. Like, it really brings back the doom. And, oh, God, the atmosphere is just bleak and oppressive as hell, transcend into absolute disillusion.
Dude, the end of that song.
Ugh.
Possibly one of my favorite breakdowns.
Yeah.
The most
Ever.
sour of faces. This is Purvis Stank Face album.
Yeah.
But yeah, I had it at number 3. I mean, there's some steep competition for those, number 1 and number 2 spots, but Jesus Christ, this album's awesome.
Yeah, this band likes playing games with me. It likes to put out an album that I think is just okay, and then they go out and put out a banger. This is my number 3, like Nick said, and yeah, just fucking awesome. The one song that nobody talked about, the Hellions Genesis.
I probably brought it up.
Okay, yeah.
It was close. It was close.
I had to let it go.
That's one of my favorite songs that they've written. I also really loved, of course, Ascend into the Eternal. But yeah, the production, the aggressiveness, the doom, everything is back, and yeah, fuck yeah, number 3.
Dude, that guitar tone is just...
Yeah, that guitar.
That's enough.
To me, it was that harmony.
You guys are cheesing too hard about it for having it so
I know,
low. That's all I'm
right?
saying.
Don't say. I mean,
That's all I'm saying. You can...
Shred and I knew. We felt it. It was like, is that Satan coming through the speakers? Yes, it is.
Have a seat, Satan. You want a coffee?
Yeah, let's talk. Let's chat.
So then 2 more years go by. Thankfully, it's only 2 this time, not 6,
We're
because
getting back on
we all
our
know
routine.
that's way too long to go without an Incantation album. Dirges of Elysium, back on listenable records, and we stick with the same lineup for a change for at least one album, and that's a good thing. I had this at number 7. Guitars sound more full than usual, I think, which is really cool.
One of my favorite guitar sounds for that.
Yeah, I think so too. Drums are a bit compressed again, but the guitar really punches in the nuts here. And you get a little bit of lead work too in the song Debauchery, and lead work doesn't seem to appear much in Incantation from at least what I noticed. The band hasn't forgotten about blazing speed as well as doom. A lot of riffs in here to me sounded like something Vader would do. The song Carrion Prophecy is sour lemons in your ears.
It's a live staple, too.
Just God in heaven. Why is it that songs with Carrion in the title whoop ass? Like the Carrion Call from Misery Index?
Yeah, they're rotten already in name.
Songs are a bit longer, and another 16.5-minute ending track.
Why?
Because it's good.
I think it was a good track.
Yeah.
And they definitely haven't forgotten about their doomy side, as this song is seeping with it. And again, it's number 7, but I mean, at this point in the game, really, I could rank a lot of these albums number 1. We talked about that.
No, Incantation's just a band where it's a very similar recipe every time, so it's...
Yeah.
It just falls as it falls.
The amounts of the spices just change, but the ingredients are still pretty much the same.
Yeah, they started with a killer recipe.
Yeah, there you go.
Killer recipe.
They just passed it on from family member to family member, and they tweaked it.
All I gotta say is, if the snare drum was a little bit bigger and a little bit punchier, this just would have whooped ass on all levels.
I had a number 6, fell to a few of the higher ones. Basket of a Plagued Soul, short but sweet, but man, is that thing menacing as fuck. And now you brought up Carrion. It's just doomy metal at its finest. The thrashiness in it, it's killer. But 6.
Yeah.
I had this at number 7. Solid album, middle of the road. It was a delicious meal, but they've given me better meals that are tastier. What do you want me to say?
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, you've been hitting the buffet, and you're like, well, I had this, but I'm still going to eat it because
It's still
good.
delicious.
Yeah.
Still
But it's
going
not
there.
the prime rib, but it's still tasty.
I also had this at number 7. Again, same issue. Like, this was an awesome album. It also followed a really awesome album that, kind of sparked interest again in Incantation after a long break. This feels like an appropriate follow-up. I like the change in the mix. It does feel a little bit more raw and gritty, and the guitars do sound a lot more full. Carrion Prophecy, holy shit. Bend that fucking riff. I love it. Like, it sounds just evil as shit. Debauchery is fucking high octane and in your face. I like how different some of the tracks are, like in terms of like just like this one goes for blazing speed, this one just brings the doom. It's an oddly paced album though overall. Like, it's kind of like a haphazard listen from front to back, but I dig it. This is a solid album. A little bit of the Blackened Atmosphere returns too, but again, a lot of competition, and it fell to 7, but I fucking love it.
Alright, so then 3 years go by. And in 2017, they released the album Profane Nexus. This is their return to Relapse Records. Welcome home to Relapse. We lose Alex Books on guitar, and for a minute it goes back to a three-piece lineup. John McEntee, Kyle Severin, and Chuck Sherwood. This was recorded in the band's own studio, again, in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. Mixed and mastered once again by Mr. Dan Swano. While the album sounds compressed, again, it's not over the top. I had this at number 8. It's like everybody said, they have albums that go like this.
Yep.
Sometimes albums are higher and sometimes they're lower, and this just kind of fell a little lower. And again, it's not to say it's a bad album. This album, I think, pays a little bit more attention to death metal once again, more so than Doom.
Definitely.
You get a bit more melody in it.
A little bit.
But not a whole lot. Visceral, hexahedron, these fucking names, you guys.
It's a geometric shape of grossness.
Visceral hexahedron is overall doomy and evil. The Horns of Gefren, and I'm not going to name all the songs because I'm going to leave some for these fucks. But, it just kind of fell to number 8. Just there's things that beat it out. Still a good record, but things beat it out. That's my story.
Yeah.
What's your story, Miller?
My story is number 5. I actually had this a little higher. I don't know why this album, I just latched onto this. Maybe they're just coming into a big stride toward the end of their current career. I guess they're still going, thankfully. Messiah Nostrum jams, and then they give you that big payoff riff at the end. The leads and melodies are great. The guitar work is solid throughout. Incorporeal Despair is kind of a mood killer for me, but then it goes into Zypic Tokek.
Is that like a Zelda boss?
Zyp Tokek.
Okay.
Zyp Tokek.
Sure.
Everything's fine again, though. So they had a song that was lackluster, but then they have another badass song. It's kind of like their albums. They're at this point, but they're hitting a stride for me. They're hitting a stride.
Yeah.
I did not like this album as much. Profane Nexus fell to number 10 for me. This album is kind of all over the place with song structure and a lot of repetition. This album feels very much to me like a one-trick pony, and I lose interest in the one trick about 2 songs in. And while it is filled with heaviness and aggressiveness, it's missing some of the big, like, fucking Satan-y moments that I love so much. So, number 10 for me.
Sure.
Kind of the same issue. I also have it at number 10, but the main issue I had was it's kind of samey across the board, and it just feels there. Like, it doesn't feel like truly explosive, except for maybe the song Lus Sepulchri or Sepulchri, whatever that is. So that's the only song that I think really kind of jumped out as like, all right, that has a very distinct riff. It's very thrashy and in your face, and the rest of it was unfortunately kind of like paint by numbers incantation, just in terms of like, okay, this is all stuff they do well. It's not arranged as well for me to really find a lot of standouts. I mean, there are some. I mean, you guys named them. I think Messiah Nostrum is also pretty good too. But overall, it's a good album, but they have a lot of good albums. And, that's a good problem to have.
Yeah, right.
So, yeah, this one fell a bit.
So then 3 more years go by to lead us to where we are currently in Incantation history with Sect of Vile Divinities. Of course, back on Relapse Records, mixed again by Dan Swano. We pick up a new member on lead guitar, Sonny Lombardozzi.
Fellow Paisan.
Yep.
You wanted me to play the Death of Doom? I do it, huh?
Hey.
I do it for you.
You may have watched Nick and I's review on Sect of Vile Divinities. I think I gave it 5 stars. I think that's back when I was still giving album 5 stars.
I think I gave it 4 or 4.5. It was on my year-end list.
It was on mine too. Everything sounds clear and gross and defined, and I'm not going to name all the songs. Really, if you want to know my take on this record, go watch our review. I had this at number 5, and again, there were just things that came up over it, but at the same time, this is a killer fucking record. I jammed this record over and over and over again for months.
I'm still jamming it.
Yeah, and in fact, when I went through and listened to everything, I jammed this record most of all, probably 4 or 5 times. I love the hooks in Propitation, and I'm not going to name all the songs except for Scribes of the Stygian and Shadowblade Masters of Tempest. This record just kicks ass, and it's such a great representation of all of that Incantation was and became and whatever. This just kind of is the icing on the cake for Incantation.
I have this at number 1. This is my favorite album. Primordial, the main Doom riff that's in there, and it leads to that killer verse riff, and then into that just crazy pounding drum part. I love that section. Good production. You can hear everything super clear. The recording's different in a good way. I don't know. It's got a little bit of different feel to it, but I dig it. But you can hear everything. It's important, in music when you're listening to hear. The guitar work in this record is solid as fuck. So that's why it's my number 1, my favorite. I listen to it after you guys' review, and I continuously kind of jam it. Yeah, love this album.
So, for me, Sect of Vile Divinities fell to number 4. And fell is kind of a shitty way of saying that. It was in my top 5. I really like this album. By the 11th album, we have heard everything that Incantation is going to throw our way. However, I feel like this album, they went back and picked out some of the really best parts of their older discography and brought them to life in a newer time frame. For me, this is one of the strongest albums of the more recent years and really badass.
I had this at number 2. Holy shit, I love this album. And pretty much I agree with what Shred said. I think this just brings in way more dynamics. The hooks on this album are fucking filthy. And I can't believe this is really melodic for them. Yeah. Like, I'm not saying like, oh, these are the ballads. No, it's not that. Black Fathom's Fire actually brings in some Middle Eastern melodies that I really loved, and they are on tour with Nile next year. Coincidence? Probably not. But I don't know, all these songs just really resonate with me. I think they're also kind of different. It's paced really well. Again, the lead work I think really stands out on here. It actually kind of just spices up a bit, and it's just them firing on all cylinders. It just feels completely re-energized from the last one.
It feels right.
And yes. I can't wait to hear these songs live because they flat out crushed it. Scribes of the Stygian, Entrails of the Hag Queen. Watch that music video. It's gross, but it's awesome. But it's also gross. Just slimy bag.
Awesome.
It is gross.
I love that song. That song is awesome.
It's awesome. Yeah. But yeah, this is a flat out banger. This gets me excited for future releases, as if they really needed to get me excited for future releases. I was going to buy them anyway.
Yeah, it's 2022 next year, so
let's do it.
I mean, in the grand scheme of things,
they should have.
If you release an album every 2 years or 3 years, or
no, we're okay with taking your
just
time.
Don't go 6 years.
Just put a pre-order up now. I'll get it.
Yeah, right. Pre-order up and maybe a pre-order shirt or hoodie or hat or something.
Give me a splatter fire it, and I'm there.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, that brings us to the end of this beautiful discography. Incantation is, looking back on it now, a mixture of hip-hop, country, and gospel.
Definitely.
Oh, that's the other Incantation. This Incantation is all about being brutal and fucking heavy. And they pretty much gave us 11 albums of sheer fucking satanic raising brutality. And for that, we say thank you.
And the song titles.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, the song titles. Wow.
Great.
Incantation has influenced countless bands, and they deserve more love. And now that I went back and listened to the discography, shame on me for not listening to them sooner.
Shame on you.
Yeah. Shame on me.
Shame.
I mean, we name drop this band all the time. Anytime we hear a sludgy, ugly, cavernous sounding death metal band, it's like, oh, but they listen to Incantation.
Sounds like Incantation. That sounds an awful lot like Incantation.
That is pretty much, the truth there, though. Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. And like I said, there's a ton of death metal out there that still really holds on to what Incantation does and still does incredibly well. So that is definitely a testament to how influential and how fucking good this band is.
And really, this is just our ranking. Curious to hear what you guys would rank it at, or what you guys have to say about it.
So, as protocol, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, and if you are new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We are also on Patreon. If you'd like to help us out there should be a link down in that area someplace. And we still have shirts for sale. If you would like one, hit us up on thrallsofmetal@gmail.com. Send us a message, put shirts in it, and we will get back to you and get you an invoice. So with that, I thank you all for watching once again, and we will catch you later.